Always. So thank you, everyone, great port users, to be speaking with Jennifer that's moderating this and tell us about what the real life for portals is.
Thank you so much for having me and for having us. It's very funny. We're talking about these complex topics, but we're also talking about simplifying technology. And I don't know about y'all, but I feel like we still haven't, as a community, nailed the live stream or the meeting or the muting and unmuting of ourselves. So that is clearly, if you're a tech company on the call, there's still a gap in the market. It's just because
there is a huge gap in the market, and I can say that we've invested in tools, and we are struggling with the portal as product idea.
Yes, very much so. So thank you all for joining. That was just a great, very visual breakdown, very brave, of portals and platforms and port. Oh my, Victor, that was really a great explanation and very engaging talk. So thank you to Victor, one of the godfathers of the platform movement. And welcome to IDP IRL, or Internal Developer Portals in Real Life. As a journalist, I just like defining those terms. I will try to push that we define terms throughout, because we have all stages of adoption welcome here. So we're going to talk to 3 different businesses, as you see the happy faces on our screen, with 3 different from 3 different sectors at 3 different stages of the developer productivity and platform engineering journey, to talk about cultivating a positive internal developer experience, or DevX, and deciding when and how to adopt a internal developer portal, and maybe even a portal as a product strategy. So I want to say thank you all for joining this conversation today. And for those that are joining us live, feel free to take advantage of the Q&A button, which I believe is at the bottom of your screen, but nothing is more unpredictable than a live stream. So thank you all for joining us. And if you're in the chat and you want to say where you're coming from, or you want to share a thought in there, that's very welcome as well. So for everyone joining that may not know you already, can you please each introduce yourselves and your organizations, what your organization does, the size of your team, things like that. Tiffany, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for everyone joining in the conversation. I'm a technical product manager at Great American Insurance. Great American is a property and casualty insurer that focuses on specialized commercial products for businesses. We have global presence, I think over 7,000 employees and around 40 operations. Our headquarters are here in the beautiful, wonderful Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, fantastic. Louis, do you want to now introduce yourself and your team, please?
Sure. So I'm Louis Bailleul. I'm Chief Enterprise Architect for PGS. We are a marine geophysics company. We're doing exploration and imaging of subsurface for oil and gas, wind farm characterization, and carbon capture. And we've been on a cloud journey for the last 5 years. And my team has started the platform engineering movement within the company on the realization that we were starting to need to organize ourselves in order to support the company toward the cloud.
Pavel? Thank you.
Hey, everybody. My name is Pavel Pikat. I'm technical product owner at AMCS. And AMCS, with headquarters in Ireland, Limerick, is a global company that builds B2B integrated software for other businesses in industries such as transport, logistics, metal recycling, paper recycling. So we're building software for these industries that drive trucks, move trash around, move livestock around, and we develop integrated solutions to help them navigate the roads in the most efficient way and safely. We are around 1,200 people, growing rapidly, and my team, platform engineering, has around 5, actually 6 as of last week, 6 engineers. Very excited to be here and share our journey.
Congratulations and welcome to your new team member if they are joining the call. Let's start by talking about why this matters. Why are each of you passionate? You all come from very different industries, very different backgrounds, but you're all trying to solve the same problem. Pavel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely, Jennifer. I think our use case is very interesting to share with the world, because we've been doing DevOps in AMCS for 5-6 years now, with adoption of public cloud and move to services like Azure DevOps with CI/CD pipelines. But as a company experienced rapid growth, we went from, I think, 200 people to 1,200 employees with 500 technical roles. We realized very quickly that with the team we built 5 years ago, which was a central DevOps team with concentrated knowledge that was servicing the rest of the organization, that model has challenges with scaling. And that's where we looked at what the industry is doing and learned, hey, platform engineering is a potential solution to scalability that can, look at the developer autonomy and self-service to help increase the velocity and lead time and help with that scalability and productivity.
What challenges were you having?
All right, so I think I need to mention here the model we were operating with in our central team, which is often referred to a ticket ops, where we had a central backlog of requests that different business units and teams would raise with a central team to ask, build a pipeline or stand up a service in the cloud. And then as we grew, as I said, we started accumulating kind of a backlog or a queue of these items where we couldn't satisfy the demand in time. And then we were just effectively being a bottleneck for the organization, which is never good, right? And that's where we realized, okay, we need to really sit down and look into how we remove ourselves from slowing the business down, how we can instead accelerate the growth and help the organization to achieve what they want faster.
Mm-hmm. I see a lot of knowing nods, signaling empathy. So Louis, what about your organization? Where did you begin on this journey and why is this important, this conversation?
Yeah, so the journey started a long time ago for us, I would say. Long time, not that, but around 2018, 2019, we had an intention to go toward more cloud native solutions, mostly because we wanted to reduce our on-premise footprint and move away from maintaining our own data center and offload a little bit that. So we ended up being thrown into different concept like CI/CD or DevOps was something that wasn't something we used for our own data centers. We were in a very old modern ITIL-based organization, ticket ops, as Pavel mentioned. And moving toward DevOps, we are starting to see that it was a better way at more empowering for the dev and the ops, better community, better consistency on things. But in 2020, when the pandemic happened and the oil industry was particularly impacted, our company had to downsize significantly. We had to basically let go about 40% of the workforce, which meant that for our organization on the IT side, we were left with a huge number of systems and services that had very, very little workforce to actually maintain them. So added to that, the transition to the cloud, it was absolutely necessary for us to find a better way to empower the organization to distribute the workload in order to have more hands on the actual machinery that needed to be tended to. So this is where we ended up in the platform engineering concept, making sure that we can provide the product that can be consumed by the rest of the organization in order to build and maintain IT services.
Yeah, where your customers are your internal users and your colleagues, which I'm not trying to say that makes it easier. You have a tighter feedback loop and more direct feedback from them probably, but that doesn't make it necessarily easy.
No, it's a different relationship, but it's, interesting.
And what you're describing now isn't, well, thankfully we don't have the threat of the pandemic so on our minds and the isolation that came from it, we are still an industry that's dealing with a round of layoffs again and doing more with less, and especially dealing with just an obscenely complex cloud native landscape. We could not fit it on, probably even the developer with the largest screen in the room probably couldn't fit the whole Cloud Native Computing Foundation landscape on the screen anymore. And that is a huge cognitive load burden. So Tiffany, tell about your company. I think you're more, and like a lot of the people on the call, I'm sure, in these earlier stages of figuring out that maybe you need something and why, and maybe a portal, etc.
Yeah, I can tell you, we're really excited about working in this space, aiming to empower the developer and move the needle ultimately on our company's profitability. With our initial release of a portal, we're looking to focus on discoverability and search, and that catalog that we can provide developers with to make things, easier, and to provide kind of a pane of glass for them. I think, based on some of our initial observations, we think we can reduce our developers' time spent on a single task from something like 85 minutes down to 5 minutes, which is pretty exciting and significant. We, in some observational studies, noticed that often engaged multiple people, throughout the process to accomplish that task. So anyway, that's a little bit about our why, but this was put into motion a little bit before I was engaged in the space. In 2023, we were evaluating different tools and opportunities, and POC was performed, and we decided to move in this direction. I was engaged. This was kind of kicked over to our app dev lab, and we made the decision to adopt the portal as a product kind of implementation approach with it. So we, earlier this year, got together, and that's kind of where we kicked off our journey together. And I can get into that story a little bit more, or we can kind of stop there. And
well, we have a definition point. So what is portal as a product, Tiffany?
Yeah, well, so we're looking at making sure that we approach with the appropriate level of attention and discussion to our high-level goals, our scoping, and what we're aiming to go after first in kind of a lightweight way, really honing in on what we can understand about our developers' needs, and gathering all that feedback we can up front and along the way. So I think, that's been really important to us. Earlier this year, when we just got started, we conducted some sessions. We have a really amazing group of probably 20 larger, broader working team members, several IT executive sponsors involved, and various stakeholders who represent our portal user interests. We have contributing teams across our app dev, our platform engineering, our API COE, digital relationship management, EAM, enterprise architecture and monitoring, asset management, and even service and release management, of course. And we, as a core team, our product trio, we're a developer pair, programming, UX designer, myself, and our PO and enterprise architecture, who are working closely together on our approach, and of course working very closely with our wonderful port partners on everything. So it's been really fun.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot, and a lot more sophisticated than a lot of companies to bring all those stakeholders in early, but then you're more likely to build something that is useful and everything about it. And a part of this is because DevOps, let's be honest, sounds great, but it puts developers first in name only. And it just kind of has them owning a lot of stuff. So I think that's a really wonderful thing. And the fact that you're applying UX design to it by going through these interviews, bring all those stakeholders to the table, understanding everything. So there was a couple things that were talked about there, and I think we'll see throughout. So just to understand from everyone, what were your developers complaining about? How did you know it was time to do this? Louis is laughing a bit, so.
It's an interesting thing because it's not necessarily that they were complaining about it, that you were seeing a lot of inefficiencies. And one of the things that we realized that was missing was a way for people to actually know how to do things. When we move from on-premise to the cloud, we move into a world that it's actually very easy to consume. Like there's a lot of documentations, a lot of tutorials. Like YouTube is a fantastic resource in order to know how to do anything in the cloud. But you have 1,000 ways of doing the same thing. So what we ended up is like, because we historically used to be a pretty siloed organization with a lot of IT pockets, we ended up having a lot of services that were built kind of the same way, but not the same way. And that caused a lot of frustration. So teams that were like working on different products or different services had issues with like compatibility or consistencies. You had problematic about, okay, we did that this way, but that needed to involve that team and this team and this team, but we need to do that way for this service, and that's a different set of teams. So what we ended up is considering very quickly in the platform engineering constitution of the team was that we needed golden paths, ways that are, okay, this is how we do see this.
Define golden paths. Define golden paths.
So the golden path is basically a perfect way to do something. It's the company has chosen a way, put in place receipts, and it's an easy way to achieve what you want. You lower the barrier of entry basically in order to achieve your goal by making it the perfect way. And you don't necessarily railroad people into this one. You let some other options if you need to, but at least you have an indication, you have an arrow, you have a path that you can go through that is going to make your life easier. So that has been one of the core foundations of how we put a vision forward for our platform. Yeah.
It's very interesting that from what I've heard from everyone, developers have a lot of frustration. They have a lot of context switching that they don't like, but they're not always complaining about it. They're more reticent, and they kind of have grown accustomed to a certain level of annoyance and interruption, which calling it inefficiency is kind of better in a way, because they're just normalizing this cognitive load. And of course, Louis and I live in England, where complaining is done behind the scenes and people don't like to speak up as much. So that could be part of it, as well as perhaps my brethren in the US may complain a bit more. But there is just this normalization that, well, it's always going to be frustrating, and that's okay. So finding these inefficiencies is a good way to say it as well.
This is very interesting because it came out as a realization, not necessarily a constatation in the first place. But we realized that when we started to have like good golden paths and a number of a good self-service, it became a force multiplier. And that we've seen people that usually don't actually engage, were not actually really willing to go through the ticket ops or to actually take charge of creating something new, that were enabled and were capable of doing it. And that was something that was really great for us, is making sure that, yes, we enable the organization, we increase our efficiency, we deliver more.
It's very interesting. Another area that I guess developers have just normalized, Pavel, is all these waiting for permission, waiting for the code reviews, waiting for ticket ops, as you called it, which is a very painful kind of antonym of DevOps, I think. So can you talk more about this self-service idea and what you're hearing from your developers, since you're a product owner for your internal developers, which is an interesting role?
Yeah, absolutely. Have lots of insights to share with you guys. And let me start with just saying that there's a lot of similarities in our work about what Tiffany said about reducing the time from 85 minutes to 5 minutes using a better process, and also complaining, being the driver to realization that we need to do something, we kind of went through all of that internally as well, where both people complain that why does it take so long, and why do we have to take it with another team to create some simple things that we could have done ourselves, such as like Git repositories, which may sound very silly, but if you have to kind of dig into the inner workings of a large enterprise, then you get familiar with things like governance and golden path and abstractions, where in large organization one must really think about. So let me kind of walk you through our self-service journey and how we got to the point where we realized we need to also onboard or develop or buy internal developer portal for that, right? So I was talking about ticket ops before, and us having this huge queue of work items that we have to go through. And yes, we realized we better just let developers do it themselves, like creating Git repositories, or just give them access to cloud resources directly to do troubleshooting. But I think, as Zohar was talking in the opening remarks, we're dealing with, at the same time, with a lot of complexity that a dev team would have to think about if we were to tell them, go and do it yourself without any golden path. Just find it yourself, go take a DevOps course, go take this public cloud provider course, and then do it yourself. But
and on your own time, you still have to deliver all those things.
Yeah, exactly. And you have
on
sprint, you have feature, your own product owner is chasing the clock. Like, why is it not done? It's like, well, I'm not done with my AWS course or my Azure course to do this little task that, I would actually be fine with just waiting somebody else do it than go full journey myself. So we had to find a different way to enable self-service, but also kind of enforce our way of doing that. So I'm talking about the government's naming convention, security things. And that's where we also come to the realization that you need an abstraction. And I think this is maybe in the same field that Victor was talking about in his talk, about having the API on top of all the systems, and then have a user-friendly UI on top of that, where people can get the things they want in a user-intuitive way quickly, and then reduce that 85 minutes task involving multiple people to just go do it yourself. Takes 5 minutes, but we also can sleep at night knowing that you will follow our golden path that we designed for you. You're not going to break any rules. You're not going to create a Git repo in the wrong project in our version control system. You will not forget to put branch policies that we require, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we quickly realized, we want to do self-service, but with internal developer portal that can enable us, the platform engineering team, to build this golden path and guardrails in it. And when you think about that, okay, we need to build a product to enable our developers, right? There's this key word, basically, we're building a product for our internal people. And that's, you naturally kind of start thinking of it, well, it's a product, so let's just build it like any other product development team builds their products. Let's do a Scrum team, let's have a product owner, let's have a Scrum master, let's do sprints, let's take feedback in, work on the low-hanging fruits that people have or requests that come in, and then release it, increase the value incrementally. That's, in my book, the IDP as a product and golden paths and self-service actions. It's a wide space. There's a lot of complexity here, a lot of these buzzwords, but it's really interesting to be in that field because you realized how much improvement you are making by doing these things, how much time you're saving, going this from 85 minutes to 5 minutes. That just feels amazing when you get to that point.
When did you decide that portal was the solution for each of you? Because I think IDP is still quite a new nascent topic. When did you, was the question that it answered, or what were you looking for when you decided that was the layer of abstraction?
For us, it's because the thing we tried before didn't work.
What had you tried before?
So when we started to bring consistency and created the platform engineering team, mostly it was to bring like Kubernetes as a platform. That was the first features, first product set that we wanted to get developed. And that was based on a GitOps approach where like we had a bunch of the repositories that people needed to manipulate in order to do whatever they wanted. That was great. That works fantastically well. We had all the things you wanted about like self-service. We had a golden pass, all of that. But the cognitive load in order to use this was just insane. And like for people that just want to get namespace and deploy their application, this was way too much. So we very much realized that, okay, we needed to hide that away. And building a UI or building a new product that actually hide all this, that's not our job. That's we want to consume that. So this is where we went, okay, what exists out there? Is somebody actually solves that problem?
Yeah, as a marketer, I like one of my biggest irks of all time is development companies deciding they need to build their own website that they then can't update because it becomes a single point of failure because only one person built they built a website from scratch. And I'm seeing again in the platform engineering and internal developer portal space where they're like, we must build a new portal. We must build a platform from scratch, but that is not your differential. That's not where you're differentiating. So I appreciate that. It's a huge pet peeve of mine. So Tiffany, when did Great American decide that a portal, you asked a lot of questions of your developers. How did a portal become an answer?
Yeah, so I think, the idea was forged of the kind of minimum criteria we were going after with a portal implementation upfront. Like I said, our MVP is really focused on improving visibility to desired data for developers. Interviews pointed us to what that feedback was. And, I mentioned some of our upfront kind of storming we were doing to organize for our approach, but, thinking back, we really learned a lot. We went through an exercise of kind of thinking through our team topologies across the organization.
What's team topologies? Another definition.
Yeah, no, for sure. We wanted to look at the map of our organization, understand our developers, where they sit, and go in knowing a bit more about that detail. And as I mentioned, we're working as a product trio, so we had UX involved to take us through some really important proto persona workshopping where we honed in on those developers and what their needs were. We forged and kind of lifted where we thought our starting point could make sense, and kind of honing in on our C&D developer community. So since we started and had inception earlier in the year, we've since been really running with this MVP, getting all of the foundational setup completed, working on our API catalog, and preparing some initial scorecards and all of those things that we could provide with this initial rollout to that community. I'm going into a lot, but to think back to the user needs, it was, some of the key things we found were, the visibility into the available services, relying on people was a key theme. Developers needing to go to other developers versus knowing where to find information, finding that by, all of these various tools that are great, and some of them more loved than others. They were having to consult multiple, different pieces of documentation and so forth. So we knew we would have a strong starting point if we could start solving for those needs for our C&D developer. So we're getting ready right now to launch to that community, and have been thinking about how to make sure we're also paying enough attention to collecting feedback. So we started with like an initial soft launch. We rolled out to a smaller group of about 50 of our app dev organization to get some initial feedback and start incorporating that for the broader group of users upcoming. And then in July, in a couple weeks here, we're looking forward to welcoming others from the broader organization of about 300 users, and to get more of that initial reaction. But it seems like it's really important for us to think about all of the upcoming considerations there are, making sure like our users understand, okay, here's our starting point, and get excited about a lot of what you all are talking about, Pavel and Louis, on the front of self-service actions and the automations and all the exciting things that we'll be looking towards accomplishing here in the subsequent phases. So tailoring, enhancing more of the initial user capabilities and based on feedback, but then also thinking about all the exciting next steps we can leverage in our portal.
I'm hearing a lot of trends. I'm hearing, even though, again, very different organizations, same problem. They're looking for improved visibility to data, API catalog, accessing via the API, searchability, service visibility, reliance, everything. I'm finding certain patterns. So you've each done at least a beta test of your internal developers or fully rolled out. Were there any things that surprised you in feedback from those developers?
I can maybe share some of my thoughts, because we were, I think, a little bit over a year now in operations with our internal developer portal, and we did work on it for quite a few months in private previews with selected teams and selected stakeholders before we kind of announce it to the larger audience. And I think the first and most frequent feedback we're hearing from our stakeholders, which are not necessarily developers, like everybody, support, professional services, all engineering community, is how freaking fast they get their task and their job done, and they just love it because it enables them immediately, and it makes you proud for your work immediately, because it's such a nice feeling to help your colleague be productive. I think that's really like a driving almost force for the team to help the business and get that juicy feedback from your stakeholders, and then build more features and enable them even more and then further.
Louis?
I think some of the, the challenge and also, benefit we'll be looking forward to solving for too is how much with this initial effort we're kind of exposing and uncovering, and what it might lead to in terms of kind of subsequent actions or initiatives we want to consider based on, all right, now that we have all of this information a little more readily and at our fingertips in one place, what are the, what does that mean? What are our observations? What are the things we want to follow up internally, maybe around standards or, things of that nature too. So I think that's some of the feedback I'm hearing so far. And then, yeah, I think a lot of it is going to be getting really entrenched and kind of observing more of the nuances of what we're seeing people engage with our initial July timing. I think it's one thing to hear some initial reactions and get some of our initial soft launch feedback, but it'll be really cool to get in there and see people engaging with the product a little bit more.
Louis, you keep doing a little smile. It definitely seems like a win-win situation where your roles are very rewarding, but it's also enabling developers to actually enjoy their job more.
Yeah, for us, the feedback was in two kinds. We had the initial developers that onboarded in our first version that went through the pain of like the full GitOps manual way, that transitioned to the portal, and they were blown away by how simple it became basically. So that was already rewarding. But we had a second wave basically of onboarding, like when we lowered the barrier of entry, basically we had an interesting feedback, which is the usual feedback when you do a great job on IT, that you had no complaint. You had like expectations that, okay, this is how it should work. This is service I'm expecting. And this is effectively when you know you've done a good job, is that when your user actually like use your service and you don't get any bad feedback or anything, which is good. The last thing that we're starting to get now is like people asking questions. Okay, can I get this? Or is this something we could do? Or like, and if we were doing this, that would be pretty nice. So that's also nice.
A very clear, one of the best benefits and pitfalls of a platform engineering team is you never need to come up with ideas. Your customers are very much offering everything to you. So just a little background, how did you decide on which portal to use? And how did you start deciding where you're going to add that pane of glass or that abstraction?
I can maybe pick up this one, because we did actually a fair amount of research before we kind of settled on what we use today. And we even tried to run our self-service tooling using regular pipelines in our version control system. And it actually does work, surprisingly, for simple scenarios. But as we then learn about other needs the business has, not even related to self-service, like we wanted to build enterprise catalog because we wanted to know who owns what in the organization. We want to know our portfolio of products, right? That's software catalog, a typical feature in IDP. And then some of our other stakeholders in other business units wanted to see security and compliance metrics. That's another demand for a greater system that you can't build with pipelines. So kind of our initial research where we, of course, naturally, I'm pretty sure every single platform engineering team will land on Backstage initially because it's just so big, it's everywhere, right? But what comes to mind first when people mention Backstage is complexity, because you have to build it yourself. And we had very, very small team. So we did try to kind of run it locally, and then I don't think we have resources to build it. So we started exploring SaaS. And we had a lot of good players on the market. I think there are even more now. But what caught our attention, and of course, disclaimer, we are using Port as our internal developer portal today. I think Port, and not gonna lie, like the marketing department is very, very good, or community in general is very good at educating businesses such as ours on all the possible use cases where internal developer portal can be used, even those that we didn't think of ourselves. But then as it was kind of, it was a pull, not a pull model from us, but a push rather, right? And the attention to detail and also the feature set of Port caught our attention, and then we just said, that sounds exactly what we need today, and it's ready. It has such a good offer, and it's 110% match what we want to build.
That's
so I'd
great.
say it was easy pick.
Also, that comes from early customers of Port telling what they want. So I'm sure that it will expand in use cases. I know FinOps came up because there was just this demand. Again, trying to do more with less. And certainly the cloud companies can take less and we can do more. We have a question from the audience. Thank you, Evan, which I think is a very valid question. How have you gone about measuring your time savings for tasks? You've touted some really impressive stuff, but how did you measure it? Louis, you're nodding.
We had our ticketing system that was actually centralizing everything before, so we could actually compare time to resolution between what a ticket were doing on average and what the self-service section is not doing. And yeah, it is pretty impressive.
Okay, I think that was a valid question, and hopefully tools will help you do that. And just to do service to the audience backstage, when we talk about backstage, that's Spotify's open source offering that helps people build developer portals. But the problem is that open source is not free, and too much customization, too much building it your own can sometimes be a great struggle, just like trying to build a platform from scratch, a portal from scratch, or a website from scratch. So that can happen. And we have another question from Matthew, which I think is really good, because we've kind of talked about the guardrails, not the gates, and how you're trying to get people to go on this golden path because it's the path of least resistance. It's easier. I always talk about the yellow brick road. You should follow the yellow brick road, but if you get off, you might fall asleep in a patch of poppies and find your way, and you're responsible when the flying monkeys come and get you. So you can go your own path, but it's probably better to follow the yellow brick road. Copyright infringement on my part. And I'm sure that was out of tune. So one of these guardrails, if we're using Netflix guardrails, not gates, terminology Matthew brings up is, how do you deal with security in the IDP? And he brought up a couple examples: keeping teams from changing other teams' resources, controlling the resources a member is allowed to create. For example, an SRE, a site reliability engineer, can create users clusters, whereas other developers can only create S3 buckets. So we're talking about kind of getting into, at what level do you put those abstraction layers, layers, and then how do you factor security into your internal developer portal IRL in real life? Tiffany,
Yeah.
you have as stakeholders some of the security people on your team, right? You've had a lot of compliance, everybody involved. So were they influential in you deciding where you're putting that single pane of glass?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely rely on everybody we partner with from security standpoint. And I would just say because we're working in this really collaborative fashion, we're making decisions on our approaches for controls and teams and ownership and everything, as a collective group. So I don't know if I have much to share with you in terms of how we're approaching it. I know we're evaluating. We've had our security group evaluate our portal, and then we're of course building in security measures as we go.
Okay, well, that's very important, in that you bring those stakeholders on early. You have your key developer personas, customers, but business has to be involved as well. And I saw a lot of companies over the last year and a half stop their investment in platform engineering because they didn't see results soon enough. So these things take money, your jobs cost money, so it's important to bring that in. But I think the argument that you can increase security and compliance are very good. Louis or Pavel, do you have other ways that security is being brought into these golden paths or
We do
guardrails?
definitely. But so we took an approach where each team is autonomous, and they are responsible for adding and removing members into their own areas. But for the central management, we consider the platform product, the platform features, basically also responsibility of the platform engineering team. And we apply the same methodology here, that there is a self-service component for the platform itself that is only available to the members of the platform engineering team. For both in particular, we leverage ownership, which is a way to actually distribute this. And we have hooked up to we are Microsoft Team Shop, so we use approvals there to actually do approvals. So we have both a separation of privilege and then content that is mapped to the different boundary of teams, and then we have an approval flow that allows us to get energy trails and things like that.
Absolutely. Pavel, anything to add in the world of
Yeah, I
security?
just add to what Louis just said about ownership, because that's the model we use as well, where we try to always know who owns what, and not just inside of internal developer portal, but in other toolings like a version control system, who owns that Git repository, who owns the pipeline. And that model we use for basically controlling access to these systems based on the team who owns it. But what I would also add, that to know the ownership and to be able to track ownership very well, software catalog is also as a must feature in IDPs. Because I was talking about self-service so much for the past 45 minutes, but software catalog is kind of that very, very important piece that glues it all together. So we populate who owns what, and that is the key driver for us deciding whether you can execute certain actions against a resource that your team owns. And if you or your team doesn't own it, then sorry, it's not yours, don't touch it.
It also helps dramatically with one of the, I'm sure, key developer personas for everyone on this call, which is the onboarding engineer, whose job is to try to figure out who owns what and what, and enables security and just trust and understanding, especially in probably mostly remote first teams or hybrid teams, getting to know other teams, but in a way that's less messy and frustrating. Thank you each so much for joining us. Thank you, Louis, Tiffany, and Pavel. And thank you to the Portal Talks team for joining. I encourage everyone to continue this conversation asynchronously in the Port Slack community and add everyone on this call on LinkedIn.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
See y'all later, and I'm sure we're all going to take a break before Abby Notice talk on why should I ask developers when planning the portal, which hopefully we answered a bit this time.
Many questions is the answer.
Yes, and open-ended ones. Thank you
Yes.
so much, everyone. Thank you, Renee.
Okay, goodbye.